The fluorescent lights of JFK Airport's terminal forecast, their usual harsh glow over the bustling crowd of travelers on that cold Tuesday morning in March. Among the sea of hurried passengers dragging suitcases and checking boarding passes was Sarah Chen, a 29-year-old single mother from Queens, pushing a worn stroller that had seen better days. Inside the stroller sat her 3-year-old daughter Emma, clutching a small stuffed elephant that had been her constant companion since birth. Emma's wide brown eyes took in all the airport chaos with the wonder that only a child could possess. Pointing excitedly at airplanes through the massive windows and giggling at the automated announcements echoing throughout the terminal, Sarah looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from working 2 jobs while raising a child alone. Her nurse scrubs were wrinkled from a 12-hour shift at the hospital, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail that she hadn't had time to fix. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights spent caring for patients and then coming home to care for Emma. They weren't at JFK to catch a flight. Sarah couldn't afford a vacation, couldn't even afford a day off most weeks. Instead, they were there because Emma had been fascinated by airplanes ever since she could talk, and the airport was one of the few free entertainment options Sarah could provide for her daughter. Every few weeks, when Sarah had a rare day off that coincided with decent weather, she would take Emma to watch the planes take off and land. The stroller they used was a hand-me-down from Sarah's sister, passed down through 3 other children before reaching Emma. One of the front wheels had a tendency to stick, making it difficult to maneuver through crowds, and the fabric was faded from years of use. Yes, but it was functional, and that was all. Sarah could manage on her tight budget. As they made their way through the terminal toward the observation area, Sarah noticed something unusual. There was a man in what appeared to be a formal military uniform standing near the security checkpoint. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with perfectly pressed clothing and polished shoes that reflected the terminal lights. His posture was rigid, professional, and his eyes seemed to scan the crowd with practiced alertness. The uniform was distinctive, not American military, but something Sarah couldn't immediately identify. It was deep blue with gold accents, complete with ceremonial elements that suggested this person held some kind of honor guard position. Other travelers were giving him curious glances, some even stopping to take discreet photos. Clearly intrigued by his presence in what was typically a civilian space, Emma noticed him too, her attention drawn away from the airplanes for the first time since they'd arrived. "Mama, look at the pretty man," she said in her clear, high voice, pointing directly at the uniformed figure. "He looks like a prince from my books." Sarah hushed her daughter gently, not wanting to draw attention to themselves. She had learned to keep a low profile in public spaces, partly from natural shyness, but mostly from the practical wisdom that came with being a single mother, navigating the world alone. Drawing attention often led to unwanted questions or judgmental looks from strangers, who assumed they knew her story. The uniformed man was Officer Marcus Wellington, member of the British Royal Guard, who was in New York as part of a diplomatic security detail. He had been trained at Sandhurst Military Academy and had served with distinction for 8 years, including ceremonial duties at Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. His presence at JFK was part of advanced security preparations for a minor royal visit scheduled for later that week. Marcus had been observing the terminal for potential security concerns, a routine part of his assignment that required him to identify anything unusual or potentially problematic in the environment. His trained eye automatically cataloged details: unusual behavior, unattended bags, individuals who seemed nervous or out of place, but something else caught his attention. As he watched the crowd flow past him, it was the young mother with the stroller, specifically the way she moved through the terminal. There was something in her careful navigation around other travelers, the way she kept her daughter close, and the gentle but firm way she corrected Emma's excited pointing that spoke to Marcus of someone trying very hard to remain invisible while still giving her child a special experience. Marcus had grown up in a military family himself, the son of a career sergeant major who had served in Northern Ireland and the Falklands. He understood the discipline required to maintain dignity in difficult circumstances. and he recognized it in this young woman's bearing despite her obvious exhaustion and the challenges of managing a toddler in a crowded airport. His attention was particularly drawn to the stroller itself. As someone trained to notice details, he could see that it was struggling mechanically. The stuck wheel was causing the mother to work much harder than necessary to push it, and he noticed how she had to lift the front end slightly every few steps to keep it moving forward. The extra effort was clearly taking a toll on someone who already looked physically drained. Emma's innocent comment about him looking like a prince had carried clearly in the relatively quiet area near the security checkpoint, and Marcus found himself fighting back a smile. In his line of work, maintaining composure and professional demeanor were essential. But there was something disarming about a child's honest observation as Sarah continued to push the difficult stroller toward the observation area. Marcus made a decision that went against his training and protocol. His assignment was to observe and report, to maintain his position and avoid unnecessary interaction with civilians. Diplomatic security was serious business, and any deviation from established procedures could have consequences. But watching this mother struggle with the broken stroller while trying to give her daughter a simple joy like watching airplanes stirred something in Marcus that was stronger than protocol. He thought of his own mother, who had raised him and his two sisters largely alone during his father's frequent deployments. He remembered her quiet strength, her determination to provide normal childhood experiences, despite the challenges of military life. Marcus stepped away from his assigned position and began walking toward Sarah and Emma. He moved with the measured, confident pace that was second nature after years of ceremonial duties, his polished shoes clicking against the terminal floor in a steady rhythm that drew the attention of nearby travelers as he approached. Sarah noticed him coming toward them and felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. In her experience, when official-looking people approached her and Emma in public spaces, it usually meant some kind of problem or question about what they were doing there. She instinctively moved closer to the stroller, her protective instincts kicking in as she prepared to explain their perfectly innocent presence in the airport. Marcus could see the tension in Sarah's shoulders as he approached. The way she positioned herself slightly in front of the stroller in an unconsciously protective gesture. He recognized the look of someone who had learned to be wary of authority figures, and it made him even more determined to approach this situation with care and sensitivity. "Excuse me, miss," Marcus said as he reached them, his British accent immediately apparent and somehow making his formal appearance seem less intimidating. His voice was gentle, trained to project authority when needed, but capable of great warmth when the situation called for it. "I couldn't help but notice you're having some difficulty with your stroller." Sarah blinked in surprise, both at his accent and at the unexpected nature of his observation. She had been prepared for questions about why they were in the airport, without tickets or concerns about Emma's excited chatter disturbing other travelers. An offer of help was the last thing she had expected from someone who looked so official and important. "Oh, it's okay," Sarah replied quickly, the automatic response of someone accustomed to managing problems alone. "We're fine, really. Just one of the wheels sticks sometimes." She gave the stroller a demonstrative push, and as if on cue, the front wheel locked up again, causing the whole contraption to jerk to one side. Emma, meanwhile, was studying Marcus with the unabashed curiosity that only small children possess. "Are you really a prince?" she asked directly, her stuffed elephant held up as if it too wanted to hear the answer. "You have a sword like in my picture books." Marcus glanced down at the ceremonial sword at his side, then back at Emma's expectant face. Despite his years of training in maintaining professional composure, he found himself charmed by her directness. "I'm not a prince," he said seriously, as if her question deserved a thoughtful answer. "I'm a guard. My job is to protect important people and make sure everyone stays safe. Like a superhero," Emma exclaimed, clapping her hands together in delight. The stuffed elephant bounced in her lap as she wiggled with excitement. "Mama, he's like Captain America, but with a fancy uniform." Sarah felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment at her daughter's enthusiasm, but when she looked up at Marcus, she was surprised to see him smiling rather than looking annoyed. "I'm so sorry," she began. She gets excited about things she sees in her books and movies. We don't mean to bother you. She's not bothering me at all, Marcus assured her, and Sarah could hear the sincerity in his voice. In fact, I was wondering if you might allow me to help with that stroller wheel. I have a bit of experience with mechanical problems, and it looks like it just needs a small adjustment. The offer hung in the air between them, and Sarah found herself in the uncomfortable position of needing help, but being unsure whether to accept it. Pride warred with practicality as she looked at this obviously important man offering to fix her broken down stroller in the middle of one of the world's busiest airports. Marcus seemed to understand her hesitation. I know it might seem odd, he said, lowering his voice slightly so their conversation felt more private despite the crowded terminal around them. But I actually have some free time right now, and I'd genuinely like to help if you'll let me. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus was thinking about his younger sister, who had struggled as a single mother herself after her husband was killed in Afghanistan. He remembered visiting her and seeing the same look of exhaustion and quiet determination that he recognized in Sarah's face. He remembered how much small gestures of help had meant to his sister during those difficult years. Please, Mama. Emma chimed in, apparently having decided that Marcus was trustworthy based on his superhero status. Let the nice guard man help us. Then maybe we can see the airplanes better. Sarah looked between her daughter's eager face and Marcus's patient expression, weighing her options. The stroller really was becoming increasingly difficult to manage, and she had noticed other travelers occasionally giving them annoyed looks when she had to stop to wrestle with the wheel. Finally, she nodded. If you're sure it's not too much trouble. No trouble at all, Marcus replied, and Sarah could see he meant it. Would you mind if I take a look? Sarah carefully lifted Emma out of the stroller, settling her daughter on a nearby bench where she could watch the proceedings while still being close enough to hold her mother's hand. Marcus knelt down beside the stroller with the same careful attention to posture and precision that characterized all his movements. Even in this informal situation, as he examined the wheel mechanism, other travelers began to notice what was happening. It wasn't every day that someone in such a formal military uniform was seen kneeling on an airport floor working on a child's stroller. A few people stopped to watch, pulled in by the unusual sight of this elegant figure in ceremonial dress focusing intently on such a mundane repair. Marcus quickly identified the problem. A small piece of debris had gotten lodged in the wheel housing, and over time it had worn against the axle, creating enough friction to cause the wheel to stick. It was the kind of issue that would only get worse over time, eventually making the stroller completely unusable. I can see what's causing the trouble, Marcus told Sarah as he worked. It's actually a fairly simple fix, but it's the sort of thing that would be difficult to manage on your own without the right tools. From somewhere in his uniform, Marcus produced a small multi-tool that was apparently part of his standard equipment. Sarah watched in amazement as he carefully cleaned out the debris, straightened a slightly bent component, and applied what appeared to be a small amount of lubricant from a tiny container. Emma was completely fascinated by the process. A steady stream of questions about what Marcus was doing and why. Far from being annoyed by her chatter, Marcus patiently explained each step in terms a 3-year-old could understand, turning the repair into an impromptu lesson about how things work and the importance of taking care of the tools we depend on. There, Marcus said finally, standing up and brushing off his knees. Would you like to try it now? Sarah placed Emma back in the stroller and gave it a tentative push. The difference was immediately apparent. The stroller rolled smoothly and quietly, responding to her guidance without the jerky resistance that had been making their airport visits such a physical challenge. The transformation of the stroller was remarkable, but what struck Sarah even more was the way Marcus had approached the entire situation. There had been no condescension in his manner, no suggestion that he was doing her some great favor that she should be grateful for. Instead, he had treated the repair as a simple problem with a simple solution, approached with the same professionalism he would bring to any other task. This is amazing, Sarah said, pushing the stroller in a small circle to test its movement. I can't believe how smoothly it rolls now. Thank you so much. She paused, suddenly realizing she didn't even know his name. I'm Sarah, by the way, and this is Emma. Officer Marcus Wellington, He replied with a slight formal bow that made Emma giggle with delight, and it was truly my pleasure to help. Emma immediately attempted to copy his bow from her seated position in the stroller, creating an adorable, if wobbly, approximation that made several nearby travelers smile. "Officer Marcus," she announced proudly, as if she had just learned a magic word. "Are you going to come see the airplanes with us?" Sarah felt her cheeks redden again. Emma, "Officer Wellington is working. He has important things to do." Looked up at Marcus apologetically. "We're just here to watch the planes take off and land. It's kind of our thing. Emma loves airplanes, and it's free entertainment on my days off." Marcus glanced at his watch, calculating the time until his next required check-in with the security coordination team. He had been given considerable discretion in how he spent the morning, with instructions to observe and familiarize himself with the terminal layout. Technically, spending time in the observation area would be consistent with those instructions. Actually, he said, I wouldn't mind seeing the airplanes myself. It's been a while since I've had the chance to watch them from a passenger's perspective rather than from inside one. The small crowd that had gathered to watch the stroller repair was still lingering, many of them now openly curious about this unusual interaction. Marcus was aware of the attention, but chose to ignore it, focusing instead on Sarah and Emma. He had spent enough years in ceremonial roles to be comfortable being observed. And something about this simple family had captured his interest in a way that made the watching crowd seem irrelevant, as they made their way toward the observation area. Emma kept up a steady stream of chatter about airplanes, asking Marcus if he had ever been in a helicopter, whether he had flown to America, and if he knew how planes stayed up in the sky. Marcus answered each question seriously, treating her curiosity with the same respect he would show to any briefing or debriefing session. Sarah found herself relaxing as they walked, the smooth operation of the stroller making the journey effortless. For the first time in months, she listened to Marcus explaining to Emma about jet engines and flight patterns, impressed by his ability to make complex concepts accessible to a 3-year-old without being patronizing. "You're very good with children," Sarah observed as they found a spot near the large windows overlooking the runway. "Do you have kids of your own?" "No children yet," Marcus replied, settling into a position where he could easily see both the runway and keep an eye on the terminal behind them, a habit that came from years of security training. "But I have 2 younger sisters, and I spent a lot of time helping raise them when my father was deployed." Military families learn to rely on each other. Emma was already pressed against the window, her stuffed elephant held up so it could see too. "Look, Officer Marcus. There's a big white one getting ready to fly." She pointed excitedly at a jumbo jet that was being prepared for departure. Marcus moved to stand beside her, and Sarah noticed how naturally he adapted his pace and posture. To accommodate a child's perspective, he knelt down so he was at Emma's eye level and began pointing out different parts of the airplane, explaining their functions in simple terms. "See those big round things under the wings?" he asked Emma. "Those are the engines. They're like very powerful fans that push the airplane forward fast enough to fly. Like when I blow on my pinwheel," Emma asked, making a whooshing sound to demonstrate. "Exactly like that," Marcus confirmed, "but much, much stronger." Sarah watched this interaction with growing amazement. In her experience, most people merely tolerated Emma's enthusiasm about airplanes, offering polite but brief responses before trying to redirect their attention elsewhere. Marcus, however, seemed genuinely interested in fostering her curiosity. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus was remembering his own childhood fascination with flying machines. Encouraged by his grandfather, who had been an RAF pilot during World War II, his grandfather had taken him to air shows and spent hours explaining how different aircraft worked, nurturing a love of aviation that had influenced Marcus's decision to join the military. As they watched, a smaller private jet began its takeoff sequence, and Emma bounced with excitement. It's going, she called out, pressing her nose against the glass. Marcus pointed out the runway lights, the control tower, and the ground crew vehicles, turning their observation session into an impromptu educational experience. Other families with children began gathering near them, drawn by Emma's obvious excitement and Marcus's patient explanations. Soon, Marcus found himself giving an informal presentation to a small group of fascinated children and interested adults. He explained the basic principles of flight, talked about different types of aircraft, and even shared some stories about flying in military transport planes. Sarah watched in wonder as this distinguished officer, who could have been anywhere in the world doing important official business, instead chose to spend his morning inspiring a group of children at JFK Airport. Emma was absolutely glowing with attention, asking question after question, and clearly feeling like the most important person in the world. "Officer Marcus," Emma said during a brief pause in airplane activity, "why are you so nice to us?" The question was so direct and innocent that it brought a moment of silence to their small group. Marcus considered his answer carefully, aware that several adults were listening as intently as the children. "Because kindness matters," he said simply. "And because watching airplanes is more fun when you have good company to share it with." Emma's question seemed to resonate with everyone in their small gathering. Parents exchanged glances that suggested they were thinking about how rarely their children encountered such genuine kindness from strangers, especially from someone in such an obviously important position. Marcus's simple answer about kindness mattering had been delivered without pretension or self-consciousness, as if he were stating an obvious fact rather than expressing a philosophy of life. But Sarah could see that his words had affected the other adults present, many of whom seemed to be reflecting on their own daily interactions and opportunities to show kindness. A businessman who had been checking his phone, while his daughter watched the plane, suddenly put the device away and knelt down beside his child, asking her what she found most interesting about the aircraft they were observing. A tired-looking mother with twin boys stopped trying to hurry them along and instead allowed them to ask Marcus questions about the different uniforms worn by the ground crew workers. "Officer Marcus," Emma continued, emboldened by his patient attention, "do you miss your family when you're far away?" Sarah felt a small pang of embarrassment at her daughter's personal question, but Marcus didn't seem to mind. "I do miss them," he admitted. "But part of serving others means sometimes being away from the people we love most. The important thing is making sure that when we are together, we make those moments count." As he spoke, Marcus was thinking about his sister back in England, raising her young son alone while dealing with her own grief and financial struggles. He thought about the phone calls where she tried to sound cheerful and independent, not wanting to burden him with her difficulties. He realized that Emma's innocent questions were helping him understand something important about his own motivations and values. A large international flight began its approach to landing. Marcus used the opportunity to explain to the children how pilots communicate with air traffic controllers and how the landing process works. His explanations were detailed enough to be educational, but simple enough for young minds to grasp. And Sarah noticed that even some of the adults were learning things they hadn't known before. "The pilots have to follow very specific rules," Marcus told the group. "Just like how we follow rules in school or at home, pilots follow rules to keep everyone safe. They can't just land wherever they want. They have to wait for permission and follow the instructions they're given." Emma nodded solemnly, processing this information. "It's like how I have to wait for Mama to say it's okay to cross the street." "Exactly like that," Marcus confirmed. "Rules help keep everyone safe, whether you're walking across the street or flying an airplane." Sarah found herself thinking about the contrast between this conversation and the usual chaos of their airport visits. Typically, she spent most of her time trying to manage Emma's excitement while dealing with the problematic stroller, often leaving them both feeling frustrated by the end of their outing. Today, instead of feeling like they were struggling through a difficult activity, Emma was having what was clearly going to be one of her most memorable experiences. As the morning progressed, Marcus checked his watch and realized he had been away from his assigned position for nearly an hour. He should have been concerned about potential questions from his supervisors, but instead he found himself reluctant to end this unexpected interlude. The joy on Emma's face and the gratitude in Sarah's eyes had reminded him why he had chosen a career in service in the first place. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to return to work soon," Marcus told the group, and several of the children, including Emma, expressed their disappointment. "But there are more planes coming," Emma protested, pointing to another aircraft that was taxiing toward takeoff There are indeed, Marcus agreed, and I think you'll enjoy watching them with your mama. She knows a lot about airplanes, too. She's been bringing you here to see them, after all. Sarah felt a warm glow at being included in the aviation expertise, even though she knew her knowledge was limited to whatever Emma had taught her through her enthusiasm. But she appreciated Marcus's way of making her feel valued and important in her daughter's eyes. Before leaving, Marcus did something that would be talked about for years by the families who witnessed it. He removed one of the small pins from his uniform, a simple but elegant piece that bore the insignia of the Royal Guard, and presented it to Emma with the same formal ceremony he would use in an official military function. "This is for you," he said, bending down to Emma's level and speaking in a voice that carried clearly to everyone in their small crowd. "It's to help you remember that being curious about the world and asking good questions are very important qualities. Keep learning about airplanes and about everything else that interests you." Emma accepted the pin with wide eyes, holding it carefully in her small hands as if it were made of the most precious metal in the world. "Thank you, Officer Marcus. I'll keep it forever and ever." The crowd that had gathered around them had grown larger as word spread through the terminal about the Royal Guard who was entertaining children at the observation area. Some people were taking photos and videos, but most were simply watching with expressions of appreciation and surprise. Sarah realized that they had attracted quite an audience, and she felt a moment of self-consciousness about being at the center of so much attention. But when she looked around at the faces watching them, she saw warmth and approval rather than judgment. These strangers seemed to understand that they were witnessing something special, an example of human kindness that transcended official duties and social boundaries. "Thank you," Sarah said to Marcus, her voice thick with emotion. I can't even express how much this means to us. You've given Emma something wonderful to remember." Marcus straightened up and gave her that same slight formal bow he had offered when they first met. "The pleasure has been entirely mine," he said. "Emma is a remarkable young lady, and you should be very proud of the curiosity and kindness you're fostering in her." As Marcus prepared to leave, several people in the crowd began to applaud, starting softly, but building to a genuine ovation of appreciation. The applause that began with a few appreciative adults quickly spread throughout the observation area, creating a moment that seemed to suspend the usual anonymity and rush of airport life. Marcus, accustomed to ceremonial situations where applause was expected, found himself genuinely moved by this spontaneous recognition from complete strangers. He turned to acknowledge the crowd with a respectful nod, his military bearing evident even in this informal setting. But what struck everyone present was the lack of self-consciousness or embarrassment in his demeanor. He accepted their appreciation with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout the morning, as if acts of kindness were simply part of his normal routine. Emma, still clutching the Royal Guard pin in her small hands, suddenly broke away from Sarah and ran to Marcus, wrapping her arms around his legs in an impulsive hug. The gesture was so unexpected and heartfelt that it brought tears to several people's eyes, including Sarah's. "Thank you for being my friend," Emma said, her voice muffled against Marcus's uniform. "You're the nicest guard in the whole world." Marcus gently returned the hug, placing one hand on Emma's head with the careful tenderness of someone who understands the precious nature of a child's trust. For a moment, his formal composure softened completely, revealing the man behind the uniform, someone who was genuinely touched by this innocent gesture of affection. "Thank you, Emma," he said quietly. "You've made my day much brighter than it was when it started." As Marcus finally began to walk away, returning to his official duties, the crowd slowly began to disperse. But the atmosphere in the terminal had been permanently changed by what they had witnessed. Conversations struck up between strangers who had shared the experience. Parents began engaging more actively with their children's interests, and there was a general sense of warmth and community that seemed to spread beyond the immediate area. Sarah and Emma remained at the observation windows for another hour, watching planes and talking about their encounter with Officer Marcus. Emma insisted on holding the guard pin throughout their stay, examining it carefully and asking her mother to help her understand what the symbols meant. "Mama," Emma said as they finally prepared to leave, "why don't more people act like Officer Marcus?" It was a profound question from a 3-year-old, one that Sarah found herself pondering as she pushed the beautifully functioning stroller back through the terminal. How do you explain to a child that kindness requires courage, that taking time for others requires prioritizing their needs over your own convenience, that genuine interest in someone else's joy is actually quite rare in daily life? I think most people want to be kind, Sarah finally answered. But sometimes they get so busy with their own worries that they forget to notice when someone else might need help or friendship. Emma seemed to consider this explanation seriously. Officer Marcus wasn't too busy. She observed with the clear logic of childhood. No, Sarah agreed. He wasn't too busy. That's what made him so special.
Nice.
What neither Sarah nor Emma knew was that their encounter with Marcus had been observed by more people than just those in the immediate area. Several travelers had posted videos and photos on social media. And the story of the Royal Guard who stopped his official duties to help a struggling mother and entertain children at JFK Airport was beginning to spread across the internet. By the time Sarah and Emma reached home that evening, the story had been picked up by local news outlets and was being shared thousands of times across various platforms. The video showed Marcus kneeling to fix the stroller, explaining airplanes to fascinated children, and accepting Emma's spontaneous hug with such genuine warmth that viewers found themselves moved to tears. Comments poured in from around the world, with people sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness from strangers and expressing hope that Marcus's example might inspire others to similar acts of compassion. Military personnel from various countries commented on how Marcus had exemplified the best traditions of service, showing that true strength lies in using one's position and abilities to help others. Sarah discovered the online attention when her sister called that evening, having seen one of the videos shared by a friend on social media. "Sarah, is this you and Emma at the airport?" her sister asked excitedly. "There's a video going viral of a British soldier helping you with Emma's stroller." Sarah quickly found the videos online, was amazed to see their morning adventure from the perspective of other observers. The comments were overwhelmingly positive, with thousands of people expressing appreciation for Marcus's kindness and admiration for the way he had treated Emma with such respect and attention. Many commenters noted that Marcus could have simply observed the situation and continued with his official duties, as would have been perfectly acceptable and expected. Instead, he had chosen to see a problem he could solve and a child whose curiosity he could nurture. Treating both as worthy of his time and attention, the story reached Marcus's superiors within hours. But rather than the disciplinary action he might have expected for deviating from his assigned duties, he received commendation for his representation of British values and military professionalism. The positive international attention his actions had generated was seen as an unexpected diplomatic success. Emma, blissfully unaware of her internet fame, spent the evening showing the Royal Guard pin to everyone who would look and retelling the story of her day with Officer Marcus to anyone who would listen. She insisted on taking the pin to bed with her, placing it carefully on her nightstand where she could see it when she woke up. "Mama," she said as Sarah tucked her in that night, "tomorrow, can we go back and see if Officer Marcus is there again?" Sarah smiled, knowing that their encounter had been a once-in-a-lifetime moment, but not wanting to disappoint Emma with that reality. "Officer Marcus has important work to do," she said gently, "but we'll always have today to remember, and we have his special pin to help us think about him." Emma nodded solemnly, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "I hope he remembers us too," she said before closing her eyes. Marcus would indeed remember them more than Emma could have imagined. The encounter with Sarah and Emma had affected him profoundly, reminding him of fundamental truths about service and human connection that had somehow become obscured by years of formal protocol and official duties. 3 weeks later, Marcus completed his security assignment in New York and returned to London. But the memory of Emma's uninhibited joy at learning about airplanes and Sarah's quiet strength as she navigated single motherhood stayed with him. He found himself thinking about their interaction during his regular duties at Buckingham Palace, wondering how they were doing and whether Emma was still carrying the pin he'd given her. The story of their encounter had continued to circulate online, eventually reaching British media outlets and becoming a feel-good story that was featured on several news programs. Marcus was interviewed by the BBC about the incident, and his thoughtful responses about the importance of human kindness and the responsibility that comes with wearing a uniform resonated with viewers. I think sometimes we get so focused on following procedures and maintaining professional distance that we forget the human element of service. But true service isn't just about following orders or protecting buildings. It's about recognizing opportunities to make someone's day a little brighter, especially when you have the ability to do so without compromising your duties. The interview sparked conversations about the role of military and security personnel in civilian life, and many people shared stories of positive encounters with service members who had gone beyond their official responsibilities to help ordinary citizens. Marcus's actions at JFK became a case study in military academies about the importance of public relations and the power of individual actions to represent institutional values. But for Marcus, the real impact was much more personal. He began to approach his duties with renewed purpose, looking for opportunities to connect with the people he was sworn to protect rather than simply monitoring them as potential security threats. He started volunteering with youth programs in his spare time, sharing his knowledge of military history and discipline with children who reminded him of Emma's curiosity and enthusiasm. Meanwhile, back in Queens, Sarah and Emma's lives had been transformed in ways both large and small. The viral attention their story received led to several unexpected opportunities. A local television station featured their story as part of a series on acts of kindness, and Sarah was invited to speak at community events about the impact of compassion on single-parent families. More practically, several viewers who had been moved by their story reached out with offers of assistance. A local mechanic who specialized in stroller and wheelchair repairs offered to service Emma's stroller free of charge whenever needed. A family photography business donated a professional photo session, giving Sarah and Emma beautiful portraits that captured Emma's joy and Sarah's quiet strength. Most significantly, the nursing supervisor at Sarah's hospital had seen the viral videos and was impressed by the grace and dignity Sarah had shown in representing single working mothers. This led to Sarah being offered a position in the hospital's community outreach program, which came with better hours, higher pay, and the opportunity to help other families navigate healthcare challenges. Emma, now 4 years old, still carried the Royal Guard pin with her everywhere. She had developed it into a kind of talisman for courage, pulling it out of her pocket whenever she felt nervous or uncertain. The pin had sparked a lasting fascination with different countries and cultures, leading Sarah to borrow library books about England and other places around the world. Their regular trips to JFK continued, but now other families often recognized them from the viral videos. Emma had become something of a celebrity among the children who frequented the observation area, often sought out by parents who hoped some of her enthusiasm for learning might rub off on their own kids one autumn afternoon. Nearly 8 months after their encounter with Marcus, Sarah and Emma were at their usual spot, watching planes, when a familiar accent caught Sarah's attention. "Excuse me, but aren't you the young lady who knows so much about airplanes?" asked Sarah. Turned around to find Marcus Wellington standing behind them, this time dressed in civilian clothes, but unmistakably the same man who had changed their lives that March morning. Emma's reaction was immediate and explosive. She launched herself from the stroller into his arms with a squeal of pure joy. Officer Marcus, you came back." Marcus caught her easily, spinning her around once before setting her down gently. "I promised myself that if I ever had another assignment in New York, I would come find my airplane expert," he said, smiling broadly. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit." Sarah was speechless, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of his gesture. "I can't believe you remembered us," she managed finally. "Or that you took the time to find us here. How could I forget?" Marcus replied. "Emma taught me that taking time to really see people and connect with them is the most important part of any job." "I've been telling that story to colleagues and friends for months." Emma immediately launched into an excited recap of everything that had happened since their last meeting, showing Marcus how the stroller worked perfectly, telling him about her new favorite airplane books, and proudly displaying the Royal Guard pin, which she still carried everywhere. Marcus listened with the same patient attention he had shown during their first meeting, asking questions and showing genuine interest in every detail of her updates. But this time, Sarah noticed there was something different in his demeanor, a warmth and ease that suggested their previous encounter had affected him as much as it had affected them. "I have something for you," Marcus said to Emma, pulling a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. Inside was a children's book about the British Royal Guard, complete with photographs and simple explanations of traditions and ceremonies. "This way you can learn about what guards do, even when we're not at airports together." Emma clutched the book to her chest as if it were the most precious thing she had ever received. "Will you read it with me?" she asked hopefully, and so they spent another afternoon together at JFK, this time with Marcus reading stories about palace ceremonies while Emma pointed out details in the photographs and asked her characteristic stream of insightful questions. Their families gradually gathered around them again, drawn by the same magnetic combination of Emma's enthusiasm and Marcus's patient teaching. As the afternoon drew to a close, Marcus stood to leave, but this time the parting felt different. "I'll be in New York for several weeks this time," he told Sarah. "If you don't mind, I'd love to take you and Emma to see some of the other interesting places in the city. There's an aviation museum in Queens that I think Emma would enjoy." Sarah's eyes filled with tears of gratitude and something deeper, the recognition that their chance encounter had blossomed into something that looked remarkably like friendship. "We would love that," she said simply. Over the following weeks, Marcus became a regular part of their lives. He joined them for weekend outings to museums and parks, helped Emma with her growing collection of books about different countries and cultures, and provided Sarah with the kind of adult companionship she hadn't realized she had been missing. But perhaps most importantly, Marcus had learned something from Sarah and Emma about what it meant to find family in unexpected places, and to recognize that the most meaningful service often happens not in grand gestures or official ceremonies, but in quiet moments of connection between people who choose to truly see each other. Their story, which had begun with a broken stroller and a curious child, had become something much larger, a testament to the power of kindness to create lasting bonds and transform lives in ways that ripple out far beyond the original moment of connection. And in the busy, impersonal environment of one of the world's largest airports, they had proven that sometimes the most important encounters are the ones that remind us of our shared humanity.